Hey guys, we're here with Tim from Beyond Driven. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I literally this morning, it's so not random, but obviously meant to be, we're having this conversation. But when I first started doing like Facebook and just really putting myself out there, and recovering out loud, like being vocal about my recovery and living my life like an open book, I got positive feedback, but also got a lot of negative feedback. And at first, it really bothered me. It really bothered me. And I'm a sensitive person, and like I feel things. And so
You're HSP.
Yeah.
Highly sensitive person.
I am. Yeah, I really am.
Me
And but it works for us at the same time because I'm able to do this work.
Absolutely.
And I've gotten to the point where like, I think with this, you're always going to have haters. And I hate using the word haters, but I just feel like anyone that's actually doing better than us, they're not hating.
No.
It's people that haven't done the work, that are sitting in self, that are, jealous, insecure, discontent, all those things. And you just have to look at where it's coming from. And that's what I do now. And I used to engage and now I don't engage, or I'll just like send a little heart, or I'll just be like, I hope you have a really good day, and I'll just leave it at that.
In someone's only responding if they're triggered by what you said.
For sure.
Or what they're seeing. So, and people they project.
Mm-hmm.
They project what they don't want to have to acknowledge and look at in themselves. They project on other people.
Yep.
It's taking all the unconscious qualities that they don't want to acknowledge in themselves and they make it about you.
Yeah.
It's like, this isn't about me. What came up for you when you saw this?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And a lot of times people are just triggered by that because, this is like a language we speak. This is something that we do. This is our life. This is our purpose. This is how we live our life. And we get so accustomed to living our lives this way and talking this way and doing these things that for an average person that may walk around with a lot of psychological masks and defense mechanisms and a lot of denial and evasion, like this is something they're not used to. And so
it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable. And so sometimes like we're just talking, like getting vulnerable or talking about a really deep topic.
Yeah.
And people are just kind of very taken back by that. And sometimes it's very like, whoa.
Yeah.
For somebody. So I think a lot of times it's triggering people
but maybe triggering them in a way they need to be triggered too. So even though they might not see it in the moment, it's going to plant that seed and they're going to think about it later.
Yeah.
I find that happens a lot in relationships and stuff too, which I want to get into because I know you do a lot of work with men.
Yeah.
Is it just men or is it men and women?
I've worked with many women over the years too. Yeah,
okay.
Both. Yeah, both.
Nice.
Yeah.
But I think, living a purposeful life and having a message that's genuine is going to reach the right people.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, like we're talking about social media, I think a lot of people get into the social media space to get rich. And that's
I was just talking about this the other day with a friend of mine.
You were. Yeah. And I mean, it's great if the money comes.
Yeah.
But you can't do it for those reasons in this space, No,
because, you can make millions and that's great, and making money is awesome. But at the same time, if you're not connected to something bigger than you, if you're not connected to a mission, a vision, then you lose sight of like what is behind it. I think a lot of people, it's like a money grab. Oh, I see coaches making money online and, I want to be a coach and I want to create an offer. And a lot of people don't even realize what goes into that.
Yeah.
And at the same time, do you really want to help people or you just want to make money online?
Yeah. Exactly. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people who are just trying to make money online.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it's too bad because there are people that, have tenure and experience and it kind of a lot of times can put a bad taste in people's mouths about, the experience they might have with coaching or even in joining a program or, everything that I created inside my program comes from my experience inside the clinical setting, developing programs, and actually working in the trenches and putting in the work for over a decade. So that's what I created in the coaching space comes from creating what I created in the clinical setting. With insurance companies and stuff, there has to be certain parameters and there has to be, you have to be hitting on multiple levels. So I think sometimes it's, you don't want to have somebody that's inept dealing with something that maybe it's out of their scope of practice. A lot of coaches don't know about scope of practice. It's like, if it's out of your scope, you probably shouldn't be trying to manage it, because you might be doing more harm than good.
For sure. That's a thing. It's definitely a thing. Like, I got sober, excuse me, almost 7 years ago. And when I was in detox, I had this like aha moment to go back to school and work in the treatment space. So got my CADE Act, started working as a case manager way too early in recovery. I was like 6 months sober. Had no idea what I was doing. I had like a 20-year run with Xanax, Adderall, pain pills. So my head, like that fuzziness wasn't even cleared out of my head. And here I am working in treatment. So, and I was a case manager for a long time, did some life coaching, got a sober living house, and was working in the clinical space. And a lot of people were coming to me like, hey, I need therapy. Can you help me? Can you be my coach? I'm like, I can't, like, I'm not a therapist. I don't have the education in this space. But a lot of it's just, oh yeah, I can do it. I can do that. It's like, if you can't, you can't.
Yeah. And if you're not equipped to handle some of those deeper issues with people, then you might end up, it's like that's also kind of brings me to, in terms of recovery, like there early on when I got involved in, the treatment industry, I saw that it was kind of like pushing people into a box, and trying to get people to fit into this one decision they needed to make. And I saw that, and, I realized over time, it's like, you're creating more harm than good, because I don't really care what it is you do. If you don't believe in it, then it's never going to work for you.
Absolutely.
Like, you really have to believe in what you're doing. And it's about really cultivating and creating a recipe for healthy living that's going to sustain you long term.
Yeah.
So if it's something that you're like begrudgingly doing because you feel like you have to, but it's inauthentic and you're not really connecting with it. And that was a part of my struggle, which was feeling like, man, like, this is my only option, is to do this. And it wasn't until what I found worked for me that I felt like, okay, I can live this way. I can sustain this. Like, I can make this work.
Yeah. Yeah. What got you sober?
Going through hell.
Are you from here?
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up here.
And here is Orange County.
Orange County. Yeah. Southern Orange County. I started using drugs when I was like 12 years old. Typical story. Like, I grew up playing music and skateboarding, and, in the mid 90s, drugs were kind of part of the culture in skating. And, I started getting involved with people that sold weed, and, we were, it was kind of just, living fast, and music and skateboarding and punk rock. And, I started using meth. I got moved. My parents got a divorce when I was 13, and my home life was pretty chaotic up until that point. And there was a lot of like trauma and dysfunction going on in my home, and my parents got the divorce. And at the same year, I went to a private Catholic school because I was getting in a lot of trouble. My parents were trying to, get me out of that situation. And hopefully they were trying to do a good thing, but it kind of isolated me away from all my friends.
Yeah.
And it put me into this really bad state of isolation. My family split up. I'm at this school, and then I ended up going to public school the next year, but I was so checked out at that point that they ended up sending me to a continuation school. Okay. And it was at that continuation school, which was like in San Juan. I got involved in just like more underground culture.
Yeah.
And I started smoking meth. And I started doing meth when I was about 16, smoked meth for like 16 to 17, went into a psychosis, went into the psych ward at 17, came out, went to my first treatment center at 17.
Oh, wow.
Came out and then didn't want to use meth anymore because I was scared of it.
Yeah.
Because I had gone like literally psychotic. Like I almost didn't come back. Like I was in a psychosis for like almost a week and a half.
Holy smokes.
And I was in Laguna Beach Hospital in the psychiatric unit.
Yeah.
And I came out of that, and then I had a knee injury. I started messing around with Xanax and Lortabs, Blues and Norcs, and I started eating those, and then just had a knee injury. I was down at the beach. I was surfing at the beach, injured my knee. And I was like the poster child for the opioid epidemic. I got an Oxycontin prescription, and then that prescription to OCs, I started abusing the prescription. And then I realized, man, I could, somebody had mentioned to me, hey man, you could take these pills and sell them and make a lot more money. So I started doing that, started doctor shopping, started making a lot of money, and then just looked basically at heroin as basically the next likely option to save money, and just supply my habit. And I started shooting heroin. And when I started to shoot heroin, my life just got darker. I just got involved in just a dark world. Yeah. And eventually got hepatitis C, multiple overdoses, Jesus, jail, I mean, people talk about PTSD, man. The stuff I went through in my addiction definitely gave me PTSD. Yeah. Just a lot of the violence and a lot of the stuff that I had gone through. Got hepatitis C, and I was put on interferon, which is it's like a chemotherapy type drug. They don't use it anymore to treat hepatitis C, but back in, like around mid 2000s, they were using it quite a bit. And what it does is it goes inside your body and it kills all the good and bad cells. And it's like chemo.
That sounds
horrible. So I was addicted to Xanax and I was addicted to methadone. Wow. I wasn't shooting heroin anymore. I was just on methadone. And I basically had like a white light experience in my room where I was right here off 17th Street in Costa Mesa. I was living at a house there, renting a room. Yeah. And, I had a job, like I was functioning.
Yeah. I had maintaining.
Yeah. Like all my friends were either dead or in prison. Like I had escaped that world, that life. I wasn't using heroin, but I was just maintaining, kind of just surviving. And just kind of I thought that I had to be on drugs for the rest of my life. Like I literally just had this illusion that I have to take Xanax.
Yeah. Like, I've had that same moment. Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. Like I'm just going to do this for the rest of my life. Yeah.
I have to do this for the rest of my life. I have horrible anxiety. I need to do this. And the methadone, I need to be on these drugs because the methadone is allowing me to not go back to hard drugs. Yeah. So something happened at the Watson factory where the methadone was produced, like in Florida. Something happened. There was like a contamination or something. Total God thing. Yeah. And I couldn't get him anywhere. And I went back because I was going to a doctor at the time. He was supplying me with them. And I went to the doctor and he said, there's no more methadone, but I can give you some oxys. No. And so he gave me some oxy. And
wow, that's crazy.
I went back to the house and I remember eating an oxy and I remember feeling like I was going backwards. And I remember thinking to myself kind of like, oh my gosh. I'm on interferon for hepatitis C. I'm still using opiates, which gave me hepatitis C. Right. And I was just I had a moment of really like cognitive dissonance where I was like, you're like totally backwards. And then I was staring at the crack in my door and I had an out of body experience for like 3 seconds where I came out of my body and I just felt peace. Oh, wow. Kind of like I feel now. Yeah. I just felt peace. And I came back in my body and I heard the voice of God speak to me. And he said, this whole time you thought you were in control, but really you're just a slave. Wow. And I realized I couldn't leave the county.
God bumps.
I couldn't leave the county. I couldn't leave the city. I couldn't go on vacation. Yeah. I was a slave. And this whole time I thought I was taking these pills and I was managing my addiction and I wasn't using heroin anymore. And, and I was in control, but I had no control. And that's where I wanted to get off everything. So I went to College Hospital in Costa Mesa and I said, I need to detox. They're like, sure, no problem. And I had detoxed there before and it's like a hospital type detox where they just do like
I've actually been there.
Yeah, they do like a 3-day. One time I actually ended up in the psych unit there.
So did I. 5150'd.
Okay, the psych unit at College Hospital is like hell on earth.
It really is.
It's
Yeah.
it's crazy. You've been in there?
Yes.
Yeah. I saw them like the guards like nearly kill a person in there.
It's crazy.
Yeah. I got in a fight in there. Yeah, it was that place is crazy. So
yeah.
I went to college and they said, we can detox you. And then they saw that I was on interferon and methadone. And they were like, sorry, we can't help you. And they turned me away and I was super defeated. And I walked out in the parking lot and this gentleman followed me out in the parking lot. He worked there. His name was Chris. And he followed me out. There's a big Hispanic dude. And he came out and he said, hey, he had a sticky note. And he said, hey, man, we can't help you, but this guy can. And he gave me the note to a doctor out in Riverside. And I went and drove out to Riverside. And this doctor gave me, basically, he's like, here, you're going to do an at-home detox, a grassroots detox. He gave me, methylcarbamol, phenobarbital, and he gave me like Tegretol for the seizures, for the Xanax.
Okay.
And I proceeded to go home and start this methadone Xanax detox at my house while I was doing interferon. And I had detoxed a lot before that, but this detox was life-changing. It literally turned, I felt like there was a Doc Martin crushing my chest every second of the day. I thought I was going to die like every second. And 3 days into it, I was so disoriented and delirious, and the muscle aches and the vomiting and the nausea. And I was so disoriented, knowing what time of day it is, where am I, what's going on, that I was too far into the detox to go backwards. So like, even if I did take a Xanax at that point or did take a methadone pill, it wouldn't even have helped because I was so already in. The interferon magnified the detox by like 1,000. So it's like detoxing off of methadone and Xanax on chemotherapy.
Wow.
So I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. And on the third day, I was in my boxers. It was like 3 a.m. And I just hit my knees and I put my hands in the air and I just put my forehead on the ground. And I said, God, if you're really real, I said, you can have my life. I throw in the towel on my life. Jesus, if you're really real, come into my life. You can have me. I'm done. Kill me. You can have my life. I'll do whatever you want me to do. And my life on that day I was restored that day. That was a miraculous day. I made it through the detox, was in post-acute withdrawal for like, another couple months.
Yeah.
And I immediately just had a calling on me to help people.
Yeah. I love that.
That was basically the beginning of my story. And that changed everything for me because I had basically done something that I thought was impossible. And everybody who saw me going through it, I had a good friend of mine, his name's Mark Blaster. And he had came over, he was a neighbor of mine at the time. And he came over to my house during the detox and he was like a big support for me and was very encouraging. And he was like the first person I had ever seen that was healthy, happy, and sober. Like he actually had the life that I saw his life and I was like, this guy is awesome. He's happy.
Yeah.
He walks around with a smile on his face. He's super funny. Like I want what this guy has. Like I want this guy's life. And I was attracted to that. And he never one time told me I needed to get clean, never told me I needed to change my life, but he made a huge impression on me.
Yeah.
It was a huge part of that journey for me in the beginning. And he would come pick me up and we would spend time together. And we ended up becoming like best friends. And so that was pretty much the beginning of it for me, is just once that was over for me, I had this yearning and this fire in me to help people.
Yeah. In that surrendering process.
Yeah.
It all made sense.
Yeah. It was the full surrender.
Yeah.
It was a surrender, like a real surrender to God.
Yeah. Our stories are very similar in different ways, but yeah, I was prescribed by a doctor too. And I was taking a lot of different things doctor prescribed and then getting more, but I was on Xanax, and Adderall prescribed by the same doctor that was prescribing me Suboxone.
Yeah.
And so
we probably went to the same doctor.
Probably. He's over here, just over here. But yeah, like just the craziness of that. And just, I had the same thought, like, I remember exactly where I was and had that conversation with myself. And this is already like 10 years in, like, I'm just going to do this for the rest of my life. And that's just the way it was going to be,
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the point where I realized, like, I am a slave to this. Like, I am not free. Like you were saying, I can't go anywhere. I couldn't get on a plane because I couldn't take stuff with me. Like holiday. I remember, you're a dad, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm a mom, and I remember just the shame and guilt I would feel like surrounding the holidays and things, wanting to make sure that I had enough. Because for people that are using like we were using, I mean, you had to use every few hours or else you were sick. And so I'd have to make sure I had extra everything, every holiday, Christmas. I was just a total slave.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it wasn't until I fully surrendered that I could see what this really was. And it got put on my heart too to make a difference.
Yeah.
Like almost immediately, like when I was in detox, it was like, this is what you need to do in one way or another. Because I come from a totally different background. I was in an industry for money. Like I came out here from Canada at 19 with a suitcase to live the Hollywood dream. And I came out here to make money, and I made a lot of money fast. And it was like on the outside, like, oh, look at all these things. I have a house, and I have a house back in Vancouver, and I've got nice cars, and I've got all these nice things, and I can travel and do whatever I want. And I was fucking dead on the inside, like dead.
Yeah.
And I was just living a life of this secret that no one really knew about, because I didn't really hang out with drug addicts. And so, I'm hanging out with these people, and the culture is to party, and they would stop and I wouldn't, I would just keep going.
Right.
And it wasn't until like I really, I had to get completely honest with myself and walk away from everything. And so it's like, okay, well, this is what you need to do with your life now.
Yeah.
And the money will come, and humbling myself. Being humble that's a hard one. Humbling yourself.
Yeah.
It's great now. It's how I live my life,
Yes.
in gratitude and in surrender and acceptance and being humble. But it's hard getting there.
Yeah. That's a quality that I think is really admirable is being humble.
Mm-hmm.
Humility is huge.
It's huge. And it's just, it's monumental in our life when we're in recovery to be able to do that, humble ourselves. I was married. You're married, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was married with this person for almost 20 years, married for 13. And it was like super abusive relationship.
Yeah. I've been there.
Okay.
Yeah. I've been there.
Yeah. And so when I got sober, I did a year of intense therapy with him. My son that's his dad. And so I'm like, okay, we're going to really try to make this work. One last shot. But it was the first time I'd ever been with him like fully sober. And by the end of that year, I knew I had to leave.
Yeah.
And so I left. I left the family home. I left everything and moved into a bedroom and started completely over. Got rid of all my stuff and started in a bedroom of someone's house and worked my way back up. But through that experience of doing whatever it took and following direction, it got me to where I am today, because I did it with purpose, and I did it with what I now have as self-love and knowing what I want in my life and what I don't want. And I'll never settle, and I'll never say what if now, and I'll never wonder, and I can now live a true life.
Most people aren't willing to do that. They're not willing to sacrifice everything that they are right now and have right now for everything they will become and what they will have. That's the inside out process, right? Is to really understand. It's like what you can have everything in the external, like you were saying, and be absolutely alone and miserable and hurting and in pain.
Yeah.
And feel like no one understands and feel so disconnected from yourself and the world around you.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, you could have nothing. I mean, I remember times in my life where I was so happy and I had nothing. I had like nothing material, but I had everything on the inside.
Yeah.
And life was so simple. And I look back at times early. And I remember I look back, some nostalgia, like how easier in my mind, how simple things were back then, because I was so grateful to just wake up and be able to go help somebody and feel like I could live in my purpose, and that I didn't have things to hide and I could just be myself. And
Yeah.
it's very liberating when you can take something that you perceived to be this major liability in your life and actually overcome it, and then utilize it and speak so openly about it as a way to help people. Is very freeing. It's a very freeing way to live. And it's like, because if you really put your life out there and for people to judge it, and like you're completely immune to what people think or feel about that because you're living in your truth. Like I think that's, and I tried to create freedom in my life from many different things, and nothing has given me that freedom.
Yeah.
Like, just, hey, this is who I am and take it or leave it. Like, I don't care about your validation. Like, I know my worth. I know who I am. And that's, it took a while to get there. It took a while to get there, because in the beginning, I remember looking in the mirror one day and I finally cut my hair. I think I got my first like official like haircut, right? Like my hair was like a mess, and I came out of that detox and I got a haircut. And I remember I pushed my hair back and like pushed it off of like my face. And I remember kind of looking in the mirror and going like, who are you? Like, I don't even know who you are, but I want to know you, like I don't even really know who I am. And it's so crazy because you start using narcotics at an early age, and it's true about what they say. It's like you truly are emotionally stunted.
For
like
sure.
I had, in so many ways, like the way that I looked at life and looked at myself, and I never forget, like I would have moments where just I would get flooded with emotions, friends' funerals that I had gone to, things that I had gone through that I literally just showed up and just was so detached from. And it all just started coming up, and I'm thinking about my friends and I'm crying, and it's like all these emotions are coming up, and I'm like, where is all this coming from?
Yeah.
All this pain that I've buried in my life. And I think that's a big thing too, that a lot of people, don't want to look at, which is the trauma, because, not everybody who's traumatized suffers from addiction,
Right.
but everybody that suffers from addiction has been traumatized.
Yeah.
Either by themselves or the environment that they've grown up in.
100%.
And the trauma that we go through, it imprints on us. It imprints on us neurologically, psychologically, socially. And, if we don't deal with that appropriately, then it can show up and it can appear as things that appear to be really healthy. It's like, look at me, I'm in recovery and I'm doing all this healthy stuff, but it's like, nah, you're using like high functioning coping now. You're still coping in the same ways, but it's under the guise of it being healthy.
Yeah.
What's most important is that you work on those deeper issues, that you work on that stuff.
Yeah.
And especially as men, like men, they're like, well, I don't want to blame my childhood. It's like, well, we're not blaming anything.
Right.
We're acknowledging.
We're acknowledging
it's a difference between blaming. It's like excuses and reasons. They're two different things.
Yeah.
Now,
For sure.
These aren't excuses, man.
Yeah.
Like you're not using this as a scapegoat to justify your own self-destruction.
Yeah.
This is a reason. It's called pathology. It's called cause and effect.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need any, it's like, the sun's coming up tomorrow, whether you like it or not. It's happening. So this is happening. This is occurring. This is a pattern in your life. And this is where it comes from. And we all have those origin stories. Like I had a lot of stories in my life about, I'm not good enough. I'm unlovable. People will leave.
Yeah.
Don't trust anyone. Never show anyone your emotions. Like it, never tell anybody the truth about how you really feel. And I built and created all these walls around me when I was younger as a way to try to feel safe.
Yeah.
And the problem with that early on, and when I finally started doing work, was, oh my gosh, like I built these walls to try to keep myself safe. And now they're a prison that I can't even connect with people through.
Yeah.
So I want to connect with you, but I have to start taking down these walls brick by brick. And I have to learn to let people into my life. especially like when it came to relationships, you know, like with relationships, I was in horrible toxic relationships, you know, terrible.
Yeah.
You know, like it's funny, you know, when I talk to a lot of people and they're like, have you ever been in a toxic relationship? I'm like, bro, have you ever had a needle in your neck in a Motel 6, you know, with your girl? It's like, you know, have you ever, it's like, bro, I'm the epitome of toxic relationships.
Yeah.
Like I've been there.
Yeah.
Right. And the reality is because I was right at home.
Yeah.
You know, I had such a toxic relationship with myself that I was tolerating toxicity and I was a perpetrator of toxic dynamics.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the thing inside of relationships too, is that most people, you know, like there's this wave of, especially nowadays, especially with social media and, you know, a lot of people, they hear and they see somebody who exhibits, you know, toxic behaviors and they go, you know, that person's a narcissist and they label the person, you know, and the reality is no, most people are just traumatized. They just have unresolved trauma and it shows up in their life without their consent and it's showing up in their life. And it's like, I tell people this all the time. If you got a pit bull from the shelter, you know, and you had a barbecue with some of your friends, and let's say that, you know, one of your buddies went to go pet the dog and the dog, you know, put its tail between its leg and, you know, ran away skittish into the doghouse outside, or it, you know, kind of lashed out or showed its teeth to somebody. Somebody pulled back and said, whoa, you know, what's up with your dog? All you would have to say is, oh, you know, he's a rescue.
Yeah.
And people would automatically attribute the way the dog acted to the way the dog was raised or experiences that happened in that dog's life that influenced that dog's behavior. But yet, ironically, people don't think the same thing when they see people struggling with addiction.
Right.
When they see people struggling with mental health.
True.
When they see people in toxic relationships. They just go, you're a toxic person. There are no toxic people. There's toxic behaviors, toxic patterns, but there are no toxic people.
Yeah.
Right? Like no person is toxic. What they are is they're wounded and they're acting out and rehearsing their unresolved issues.
Yeah.
And inside relationships, old wounds get triggered. And all of a sudden, you know, your wife for a man or your husband for a woman becomes shapeshifts into your father. Shapeshifts into somebody else in your life that harmed you or hurt you. And a lot of your same protective mechanisms that you utilized inside earlier times in your life, they come up and you utilize them as a way to survive or a way to protect yourself. And I think so many people don't see that. They're going, oh, it's a communication issue in my relationship. It's like, well, no, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not a communication issue. It's the way you react to the style of communication because it's triggering something that was already there prior to you even being in this relationship. It's just you never dealt with that.
So when you're coaching people and they're having these sort of issues within a marriage relationship, and it starts with them on the inside doing that work, what's the plan? What do you do with them?
Very first thing that I do is I build out what's called their pain map. So first we have to help them get clear about all the major pain points in their life, right? We have to also identify like what types of past traumas, root causes, origin stories, right? Like where, so they can really get a good idea. Because the problem is that when people don't have awareness, they can't make choices.
Yep.
Right. So like you're just pretty much on autopilot. You're in this subconscious program. You're in the matrix, so to speak. And you don't know that you're Neo in the matrix. You're just in the matrix.
Yeah.
Right. So if you don't have, you know, consciousness, awareness, then you can't make choices. And if you can't make choices, then you can't change. Right. So people have to first develop that awareness about, hey, like this is what it is, which requires honesty.
Yeah.
But also sometimes we're so close to it. It's so subjective that we do need somebody objectively to say, hey, let's walk through this and let's actually map this out. So that's the first thing that we do. We identify like their pain map. And then the second process is really unblocking the path to who they want to be, because a lot of people have a vision of where they want to go in their life. Like, who do I want to be? How do I want to act? Where do I want to go? But they have, you know, emotional reactions, behavioral responses, and a lot of unhealthy coping and just unhealthy habits that sabotage that vision. So it's like, I know where I want to be, but my behavior contradicts that vision. So I have like an emotional framework that sabotages my vision rather than one that supports it. So we need to recalibrate their emotional compass. So it's constantly pointing towards their vision and not them sabotaging themselves.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, that awareness from the first piece is key. You know, that awareness is huge, because once they do that, they can see in the moment, kind of catch themselves and go, oh, like I'm getting triggered and this is why I'm triggered and this is connected to this. And and then they're starting to recognize it's not actually multiple things in my life that are triggering me. It's not what's triggering me, it's why it's triggering me. And it's always the same theme. So it's like, it's not, it may be multiple different circumstances or people or experiences, but it's the same things that always are there. Yeah. And I think even in therapy and recovery in general, you know, like when we do start to do this work, like, you know, sometimes we think to ourselves like, I want to get these things to go away. Yeah. And it's like, that stuff doesn't go away. You learn how to live with it. Some pain never heals. You learn how to live with it. You learn how to do life with it. You learn how to manage it. So it's not about never being triggered again. It's not about, which I can't stand this concept, fully healed. It's like you hear this online, fully healed. It's like, that's not, no, you do shadow work long enough. You learn that like those things don't get fully healed. Yeah. Like these things exist inside of you and it's your responsibility. There are no bad parts. Right. So there's parts to you that you need to integrate. Some people call it inner child. Some people call it, right. But there's these components to you that do get triggered. And it's the imprint, it's the memory, it's the emotional imprint from your past experience. So it's about overcoming that in the moment. So we have to unblock the path to where they want to be. And then most importantly, they have to be able to apply what they're learning. Yeah. A lot of people can read books all day, but reading a book about a firearm and shooting a firearm are two different experiences. Right. Reading a book about, you know, building a Harley engine and actually wrenching on one is a totally different experience. So people have to be able to deploy, you know, specific techniques, whether it's, you know, I'm a big believer in CBT. That's, you know, my go-to is cognitive behavioral therapy, mindset, right? Deploying actual techniques into my life to get real results, because those results will yield a different outcome. And what do we know about the brain? That outcome will support positive neuroplasticity, rewiring the brain, right? And forming new neural pathways. So in order to change somebody, you don't change them through information, you change them through experience. So they have to have a new experience. The same thing happened, but I responded in a different way. And that's the true sign of mastery, is the circumstances in our life haven't changed a lot, right? The triggering moments, the world is what it is, but the way we respond has, the way that we think has, the way that we feel has. And even sometimes not in the way we feel, but the way we manage those emotions. Yeah. We can control them like a volume knob, and not allow the emotion to take us into something self-destructive that's counterproductive in terms of where we want to be in our life. You know, so those are always the steps that I hit with people, are like, you know, is the awareness, aligning, you know, their personal vision, that vision-driven alignment, like who I want to be. And then it's the transformational application of the actual tools that will yield the results. Yeah. You know, because I remember going to therapy early on in my process and I'm like, is it working? Is this working? Yeah. Like, I remember like a couple of sessions, I'm like, well, I'm probably just building rapport. I'm like, I think I'm just building rapport right now. I'm like, is this working though? Yeah. I remember coming out and going like, and then after like 7 or 8 sessions, I'm like, if I still have to ask myself this, I don't really think it's working. Yeah. I think it's only working, quote unquote, because I'm talking. And I'm finally, it's cathartic. It's good to talk. But at some point in time, it's like, all right, I'm done talking about why. I've done that. I'm done. I want to talk about what do I need to do and how do I need to do it. I want some real results in my life. Like I want things to change for me. And what can I learn? And that was so fascinating for me, you know, like learning, just the psychoeducation, learning about, you know, the brain and learning about human behavior and learning about psychology. And that opened up a whole new doorway, because I started looking at people and I'm going, wow, this lawyer, this homeless guy, this woman, this mother And this person, appear different on the outside, but they all have the same core issue that leads back to the same place. This lawyer might be a workaholic and might drink too much and be verbally abusive towards his wife. This homeless guy might, abuse crack cocaine, and deal with some, mood swings and mood lability. Maybe this mother, deals with isolation and struggles with depression, but it manifests differently. And so you start to see that, okay, we're all the same.
Yeah.
We're all the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just stuff just manifests
It
differently.
manifests differently.
Yeah. It's like what is substance abuse? It's like if you ask, hey, if you go on the street, ask 10 strangers, hey, what is addiction?
Mm-hmm.
10 out of 10 people will start talking about drugs and alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
But, drugs and alcohol don't cause drug and alcohol addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Tons of people use Coke, don't become addicted. Tons of people drink. Some of you guys probably listening drink and you're not addicted.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so if the drugs and alcohol don't cause drug and alcohol addiction, then what does that mean? That the drugs aren't the problem. They're a way that we solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is crazy. So nobody argues that, cards cause gambling addiction or that food causes food addiction or that sex causes sex addiction. Nobody argues that. So why are we pushing this narrative and story that drugs cause drug addiction?
True.
I used drugs with many people who never became addicted.
Yeah.
But why me? Well, because I was vulnerable to addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what made me vulnerable? There was a perfect storm,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I was under stress. I wasn't comfortable talking about what was going on with me. I was isolated. I was alone. I was already dealing and managing with, as we mentioned, the sensitivity and those things that leave you predisposed.
Yeah.
People say it's genes. Oh, it's genetics. Well, that's not true either.
Mm-hmm.
Because you might have a gene for breast cancer or testicular cancer, but that doesn't guarantee you're going to get cancer.
Yeah.
Have specific lifestyle choices. You smoke cigs, you do other stuff, shitty diet, higher likelihood to get cancer.
Yeah. I believe you wholeheartedly. And that's always been my outlook on it because it's those underlying issues. It's our trauma, it's our upbringing, it's those things that keep us sick. I mean, that was my story for sure. I was sexually abused for 8 years as a child by a family member. And so that led me into my spiral, of not understanding what love really was. I didn't trust people, all the things that go along with that. And, what I didn't realize really until I got sober is that when I was numbing everything out, I wanted to numb out all this bad. I didn't want to feel it. I didn't want to have to deal with all this stuff, that I was numbing out all the good too. It doesn't, that pain pill or that Xanax doesn't know okay, I'm just going to numb out these bad thoughts.
Yeah. No.
So it's everything.
Yeah.
And just in one bad relationship to another, bad life choices. And really when I got sober, it was having what you're saying, that self-awareness and looking at that and going, wow, this is all a result of this trauma that has triggered me in all these ways in my life. And I have to look at all of that if I want to make a change.
Yes.
So
yes.
yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And I feel like so many people struggle with that and they don't talk about it. And this is why we're here.
Yeah.
We need to be having this conversation. And people for so long, I was raised in a household where my mom was very loving and caring, emotional, and my dad wasn't, and so it was the toughen up sort of mentality. And with my ex-husband, it was, oh, you're so strong in all these other ways, just be strong in this too, and so I didn't cry. I still have a hard time showing my emotions fully, even though I'm an emotional, sensitive person, but actually starting to cry and doing all that, I still struggle with that. And we need to just talk about this more and feel that it's okay, and it relates to so many people in so many different ways. And I'm sure with men that you coach, that's a real problem, right?
Oh, a big problem.
What do you see the most with men that they struggle with?
So all types of things. So there's really, I've narrowed it down to 3 categories. So what I call the 3 archetypes. So if they're having problems inside a relationship, they fall into one of these 3 categories. And it's not, only this one, but they're primarily in one of these three. So it's typically the man who's an aggressor. And the aggressor is usually somebody who lashes out. He's impulsive. He has angry outbursts. He has these amygdala hijacks inside his relationships. He's constantly triggered. He's resentful. And usually it's because he was the victim of something earlier in his life. Mm. And he learned to use anger as a coping mechanism to protect himself. Mm-hmm. So he utilizes anger to feel in control. And that's his main struggle. Then you have the avoider, who's he's more dissociative. He's more disconnected. He's more neglectful. And he has very low emotional intelligence. He has a hard time expressing his love and affection for people in his life. He also avoids conflict. So he does not like facing conflict. He does not want to face the conflict in his life. And he has a tendency to be like a more dismissive, avoidant attachment style. Then you have like the pleaser, who's walks on eggshells. He placates people, tells them what they want to hear. He wears the persona and the mask. He's a yes man. He secretly has feelings of resentment and frustration because he feels like he can't express his needs. And with the avoider, back to the avoider, he learned to use isolation as a way to cope, and dissociation as a byproduct of some of the things he's been through. Whereas the pleaser learned to meet other people's needs in an attempt to get his needs met. So it's like, I'll become who you want me to be if you give me what I need from you, which mm-hmm. is to feel safe and secure and to feel like I belong and that I'm okay. And, as men, a lot of times we fall into performance-based love. Very few men are honored in the society for what their heart can give.
True. Yep.
Like men are really honored in the society for what they can provide.
It's so true.
How they can perform,
yeah,
what they can do. And so as men, we naturally fall into performance-based love. So, in relationships, a woman will say like, well, you don't understand me. I feel really unseen and unheard. I feel really neglected in this relationship. And in his mind, he's thinking, well, it's like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm providing for the family. I'm providing you guys a great life. I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. And it's very hard because as men, we perceive love as performance. It's, love is something we had to work for. It's something we had to earn. And it's something that we had to prove we deserved. And if you look at men in this society, if men can't solve problems and if, they can't, if they can't perform, it's mm-hmm. like, then they're really not, held in high regard,
yeah.
And so it's kind of sad that men get stuck in that trap of performance-based love,
yeah.
and especially inside a relationship. And those are usually some of the common things. Main ones are emotional intelligence, because as men, we're taught that having emotions makes you weak, and that, men are just very, in terms of their feelings, they have a tendency to camouflage, suppress, ignore. A lot of what goes on inside of them. And it's very hard for them because I think as men, we see other men get emotional in an unhealthy way where it's more of like the victim type, more victim mentality,
yeah.
self-pity.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that and we go, I don't want to do that. I don't admire that. Like, I don't want to do that. But rarely do we see men who are fully transparent in their emotions and actually opening up, not because it's easy, but because it's difficult, not because we're trying to throw a pity party or anything like that. And I'm not speaking negative about people that do that, right?
Yeah.
Everybody goes through that. But,
yeah.
Very rarely do we see men fully transparent and vulnerable, open and talking about what's actually going on inside of them from a place of confidence. Right? From a place of like, hey, this is not easy for me, but I'm also looking for solutions. So I call it kind of healthy vulnerability and unhealthy vulnerability. A lot of men, we see unhealthy vulnerability.
Yeah.
That like self-pity. And then we see the polar opposite extreme, which is like that extremely stoic, overcompensating ego. And then as men, the sad part is a lot of men have this perception that like, I can be that. And what they don't realize is that's just a mask.
Yeah.
It's bullshit.
Yeah.
Like it's complete bullshit. And so men, that's why a lot of times, and even I fell into this trap, and you see men like in, young men, especially young men in the culture. What they'll do is they'll like romanticize and kind of hold up on a pedestal these men who are exaggerated versions of false masculinity, right? Where it's like, oh, how many girls I got and how many chains I have and how much money I got in bands, bro. And it's all this bullshit. It's bullshit. It's a complete facade. It's overcompensation. It's not true, authentic masculinity, right? It's false. And so a lot of men look to that and they go, oh, that's who I'm supposed to be. Like especially if they don't have a good sense of a good male role model in their life, a good father figure in their life. They weren't groomed by older men that could have taught them like, hey man, like one of my first experiences in treatment, I only went to treatment twice. And I went to an indigent facility up in Pasadena. It's called Impact. And it was like where they used to shave your head and put like a toilet seat on you, like behavioral modification.
Oh, wow.
Stuff.
Okay.
Like hardcore place, right? They make you work in the kitchen. And I rolled in there and there were some older dudes. It was all AB 109, Saska, SAP. It was all guys out of prison. And I was young. I was in my early 20s. And I had like a mouth on me, and I didn't carry myself very well. And I remember a lot of those older guys, he came in my room one day and he said, hey, he called me youngster. He's like, hey, youngster. He's like, you want to come in this room over here with us? And I was like, okay. And I remember I went in the room and these guys like intended to kind of like bring me up and teach me, and they were kind of like, I remember they pulled me aside and they were like, hey bro, you tell them way too many war stories, homie. You're talking out of the side of your neck. You're telling way too many war stories. Like, keep your mouth closed. Like, hey man, like, don't talk about people like that. Oh, okay. And I'm learning kind of like, oh, okay. Hey man, like what you think is cool isn't actually cool. Like, it's actually not. Like, learn from me. And I'm really grateful for those guys. Like these guys had done hard time and they kind of took me under their wing, so to speak. And they groomed me in a great way, like taught me some very valuable lessons that were instrumental in terms of the way I carried myself and kind of what I started to look at as like, yeah, like you're right. Like I am disrespectful. Like I am like way out of line in the way I carry myself. Like, I'm delusional about what a man is. And that was really helpful for me. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what men need. Men and women, but we need someone else kind of just like calling us on our shit, sometimes in a loving, caring way.
Yeah. Especially when we think what we're doing is working.
Right.
It's like, hey bro, that's not working.
Yeah.
Like, that ain't working for you. That ain't working very well, man. It's like, all right, yeah, you're probably right. But also to be humble, right? Like we said, being humble and being teachable, being open and going like, okay, like I'm not going to, because it was very hard to get through to me as a young man. So unless I knew that you knew what you were talking about,
you weren't going to listen.
I wasn't listening.
Yeah.
I wasn't listening.
Yeah. So you're married. You have how many kids?
2
kids. What's your life like now?
Oh my gosh.
After all this work you've done.
My life stands in glaring contrast to the life I had before. So, I mean, my life is, I have an amazing life. I go to church on Sundays. I have my 2 kids who I get to spend time with throughout the week. I have a beautiful wife. We have an amazing, loving marriage. Like I get to surf and go to the gym, and like my life is very simple. And I love the simplicity and the fact that there's no chaos in my life. I have amazing men in my life that's, are just like brothers to me that, we're there for each other through thick and thin.
Yeah.
And, I just have, God has really, I've been so fortunate, and I thank God every day. Like he's fully restored my life. And it's pretty crazy when you come from the darkness into the light. And it's almost like sometimes, like even I drive around Costa Mesa, Orange County, and I'll look around at some of the motels I used to go to, and I'll look around at like certain street corners where stuff happened, and I'll think to myself like, wow, almost seems like it didn't even happen. Like the other day I was driving by a buddy of mine, his house is where his parents lived when we were growing up. And I like went to this park area where it was like the first time I ever smoked weed up in this V gutter. And like, there's a really beautiful park right there. And I just figured, it's Sunday night. Like I'm going to clear my head. I actually forgot my ID at the shooting range. So I had to go back and get my ID. So I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm going to stop in this neighborhood. It was by my middle school. And I stopped and I was looking up at the V gutter and I was just, sitting there. I'm a very nostalgic person. Like I'm very nostalgic. And I was just staring at the V gutter and I was thinking to myself, like, wow, so crazy, to think I used to smoke weed in a V gutter and be paranoid about the cops like chasing me. And now kids probably just, I used to smoke weed under a bleacher out of an apple, all paranoid. Someone's going to catch us. And nowadays kids are probably just like hitting their stizzy pen on the corner. Like it's no big deal. And how times have changed. And I mean, my life now, it's hard to believe, because for a lot of years, I kind of was under the assumption of, I think a lot of people in recovery are, which is I'm going to have to settle for a life that's average because I fucked my life up. And because I messed my life up so bad that I'm going to basically just have to settle for a life that's just an average life and at best, and be happy with that. And, nowadays, I have this coaching program. We've helped millions of people. I'm blessed to be able to live in my purpose, just helping people every day.
Yeah.
We do conferences, we do live events. It's just amazing. Like I get to travel, I get to help people. I get to be with my family, and I get to have peace in my life.
Yeah. It just shows you do the work, you live a purposeful life, you truly surrender. Anything is possible, no matter where you came from. I mean, here you are 15 years ago, right? With a needle in your arm, essentially.
Yes.
And here you are today. And to embrace the suck, because it's hard work, right? But what's on the other side is a life beyond your wildest dreams. I mean, I always say that being in recovery is a superpower, that we can do anything we want. There's endless possibilities. Shift the mindset and have the why not me mentality. Do the fucking work.
Yeah. It's a great point. A lot of people, they look at their recovery and they're like ashamed, and you should be proud of that.
Yeah.
You should be so proud.
Yeah.
You should be so proud that you faced that and overcame it, because that's a person, that's a person I want to hire. That's a person I want to go into business with. That's a person that, I want to put in a position of leadership. That's a person that can have a major impact, and because that's a person that's been through massive adversity in their life and they've learned to overcome it, which means they have resilience. And that's something you can't teach someone.
No.
You can't teach resilience.
No, you can't.
Can't teach spirituality. Like I can teach you about God, but I can't make you have an experience with God. And I can teach you about resilience and about the mindset, but you got to walk through the fire in order to get it. So a lot of people have a hard time seeing their struggle as the gateway to the more empowered version of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have to go through that to get to where we are today. I mean, it's all of that made us this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like
it's all good.
Yeah. It's hard. And it's really hard to see that, oh, wow, this could literally be all good for me.
Yeah. Like I had to take everything that happened in my life, all my trauma, and instead of like being that victim, I had to become that survivor and turn that into a positive thing in what I do now. Because if I didn't, what was it all for? I was just this person that just has all this trauma. No.
Yeah.
It's for me to do this, to shift that way of thinking, which really helped.
And how cool is that? Like I think a lot of years I used to look at my recovery and go, man, I just want to put this behind me.
Yeah.
I just want to put this behind me, man. I just want to live normally. And in a lot of ways I have put it behind me, but I've never shut the door on it in terms of like not using it as a way to reach the unreachable.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, like I've put it behind me as well in the sense of having that hate and anger
Yes.
towards it that was holding me. Like we're a slave to drugs and alcohol. I was a slave to my trauma.
Yeah.
You know, like that controlled me. Those people, those things that happened to me had control over my life. And so I put it away in that sense. You know, I forgave, I found peace. I looked at my own part in things, and then I was able to use that, you know.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
That's huge.
Yeah. What would you say to anybody out there, especially men out there that are struggling in their life, and how can they find you?
Yeah. So what would I say? There's so many things I would say.
Say it all.
Yeah, I would say, you know, this might sound so cliche, but you know, you're not alone.
Mm.
You know, and I would say that, you know, everything that you look at in your life as a liability is your greatest asset.
Mm.
You know, once you overcome everything that you're going through, I mean, you have a unique set of skills, attributes, character virtues, insight, experience that you can then impart on other people. And you can use that to truly help people. And it's not over. You know, you hold the pen, like you are the author and the architect, you know, of this story. And who do you want to be?
Yeah.
You know, what do you actually want out of your life? And that comes in every single decision that we have every day. If your heart is still beating,
Mm-hmm.
you still have choices. You still have opportunities. Like the final pages of that book have not been written. And, you know, align yourself with some good people in your life that, you know, that's huge. Having people in your life that are good examples of what you want to embody.
Mm-hmm.
Dive deep, do the work.
Yeah.
Right. Never underestimate the power of doing that work and what it will yield in your life. You know, as men, we'll invest in real estate. We'll buy a new Harley. We'll buy a boat. You know, we'll buy a new property. You know, we'll buy, you know, a new car. But we rarely invest into our mental and emotional health.
So true.
And that's the biggest ROI. That has the biggest return on your investment is when you invest into yourself. So whether that's you go to treatment, you invest in coaching, you invest in mentors, you invest in programs, in online courses, you know, like that's, if you stay in a state of perpetual learning and growth, like you're gonna evolve so hard that people have to get to know you again.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the coolest thing is people see, you know, even people from back in the day, you know, they're going to see you and people see me and they're like,
yeah,
Tim? And it's like, hey, yeah, how you doing, man? Good to see you. And it's like, whoa, you're different. It's like, well, yeah, I'm a different person. I'm a different person.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a different person because I wasn't locked into the identity of who I was and my limitations. You know, your limitations don't matter to God.
Mm-hmm.
You know, God doesn't look at your limitations. A lot of times he looks at those as opportunities to, you know, capitalize on that. So I would say that. And if people are looking where to find me, you can find me on Instagram, beyond__driven, TikTok, beyond.driven. We have a Facebook page, Beyond Driven. Yeah, and you guys can always find me on there. We have a website. Yeah, and I mean, we're always available to help people that are struggling in any regard. You know, because there's a lot of people out there that are struggling, and you know, our main goal is it's a ministry to us at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I've always looked at it like we got a ministry set up right before the gates of hell, you know, and we're there trying to divert people away.
Yeah.
You know, hey, you don't have to go down that dark road. And there's options for you, you know, and there's a lot of people that are suffering in silence. So
yeah, they are.
Please, like if you're struggling, reach out,
Mm-hmm.
you know, please reach out because believe it or not, by reaching out, you're helping another person by allowing them to fulfill their mission and their purpose in this world. Because if someone has dedicated their life to helping people, you're able to bless them. Because when I'm able to help somebody, and I'm sure you feel the same way, like we get blessed by being able to help you. So please never feel like you're a burden or that your issues are a burden because they're not. You know, that has nothing to do with the present day circumstances. You're not a burden. There's people in your life that want to help you. And sometimes the hardest part is for us to accept that help. There's nothing mature as an adult about, you know, burying what's going on with us and pretending like it's not bothering us. The most mature thing you can ever do as an adult is ask for help.
Yeah. That's what I always say. The most courageous thing you can do is ask for help. 100%.
So
Yeah.
true.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I
thank
just want to
you.
like rip this mic off and drop it on the ground to do like a gnarly mic drop. I love who you are. You're great.
Thank you.
Thank you
I
so
appreciate you
much.
having me on. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thanks, you guys. See you next time.
Thanks.